Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Prescott Town Council meeting for Monday, June 6, 2022. It is 6 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order with the usual land acknowledgement. We'll begin this meeting tonight by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples. In particular, we'd like to acknowledge tonight, as we do at all council meetings, traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Oneida and the Haudenosaunee peoples. Moving right along to item 2, that's approval of the agenda tonight. The recommendation reads that the agenda for the council meeting of June 6, 2022 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Burton, seconded by Councilor Ostrander. Any comments, questions on the agenda for this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest from members of council this evening? Seeing none, thanks all. And moving right along, we do have under 4 and 5 tonight, we have a presentation and a delegation. Starting off with 4.1, we have the year in review presentation, and we do have our fire chief here this evening. Chief Rayner, please take us through the year in review of the Prescott Fire. Well, your first year, of course as well. So congratulations again on that anniversary, and thanks for all the hard work in your first year.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a brief PowerPoint slide. Just hitting the high points, as you will, or the snapshot of the department. And I can take questions during the presentation or after, whatever is the council.
These folks aren't shy, so they'll let you know.
Okay. So because we're into June and it's year end of 21, it's nice to also incorporate where we're at in 2022. Keeping in mind all these statistics are from last year, the left side of the slide shows our call average, calls over the last 5 years. So last year we ended the year with 171 calls for service. On the right slide, the call types, this breaks them down into the basic categories that we would go to. As you can see, medical assist, we're a bulk of the calls. And I think that's based on some COVID related issues where we got on scene quick and were able to assist patients. So fire protection agreement, Augusta is in the yellow chart part, and then Edwardsburg Cardinal on the bottom. So that just basically shows over the last 5 years what we've averaged on calls each year. So 2021 in Augusta, we had 37 calls for service there and 28 in Edwardsburg. Dollar loss on the left side, we had $6,300 in 2021, and dollar loss is everything from structures, automobiles, things of that nature. Those are the numbers that we have to enter in and send to the fire marshal's office for our annual report to them. The slide adjacent to that, it just shows our hours of what our people do over the period of the year. The first one, the chief hours, that was taken into consideration, chief Morehouse's hours at the start of the year. So you can see in a short period of time in the first quarter of 2021, he put in a lot of hours. So, and then again, it just talks about our training, fire prevention, fire calls, and any committee work. Just thought this would be a kind of a nice slide to just show some of our highlights of our events in 2021. The top slide on the left was our recognition for years of service night. And then just moving clockwise, our mutual aid call to Edwardsburg Cardinal, the firefighter night, the Santa Claus parade that was just taken before the trucks went out, and obviously the train derailment, and then the slide with some of the fire company together was our educational grant from the fire marshal's office where we purchased training materials. So this slide just shows our current complement on the right. people's names and their years of service and their start date. On the left, we talk about retirements or resignations. So we had 6 people in 2021. We added 3 new members in 2021, and then we had 2 more additional resignations in 2022 and added 3 new members. So what we were hoping to do this fall is recruit for a few more members to bring our complement back up. But our new members are fitting in very well. Kevin Barrow, Josh Perrin, and Daniel Walker was last year, and Dakota Levac, Daniel Norton, and Wyatt Price this year. So the training slide, again, total number of hours of training. And with COVID, we had to kind of scale back some of our training where we had smaller groups because we were concerned about the spread of COVID. So we were able to later on in the year kind of get back to some more full-scale exercises. As you can see, the top slide was the CN hazmat rail car that we were very fortunate to be able to procure for an evening. And if you recall, we had representatives from Edmondsburg, Cardinal, and Augusta Fire Department join us as well. A couple other slides there just show our extrication training. We're very fortunate to have Prescott Towing donate vehicles for us to be able to basically destroy even more than what they were. Very good learning experience for our members. And the slide bottom left, that is an entanglement drill. So the props are all made of very sturdy plywood, and our members built those. And what that simulates is perhaps a drop ceiling coming down with all the wiring and whatnot, and how to be able to navigate through that without getting caught and become, in peril. So fire prevention with just a few pictures, a nice picture down at the waterfront of the crew out. The second one in the middle was the Eastern Ontario Children's Water Festival. We were approached, actually Tracy was approached, and a couple of our members actually did a video for the group just to be able to introduce themselves and what the fire truck does and pump some water, things like that. Our inspections are still request and complaint. Our vulnerable occupancies, so the Mayfield and Wellington House, those are annual mandatory inspections and evacuation drills. And we've been working very well with the building department, especially with the amount of development that's been going on in the town. Sean and his department has worked very well with Grant and Tracy. So, and then just a couple of other things there. It's no problem. Fire Prevention Week and then holiday messages for Christmas. So goals for this year. Our apparatus committee has been meeting to design a replacement rescue pumper. Our NFPA standards, mandatory firefighter 1 certification that was coming down from the province. We're ongoing with that. At the operations center, we have a first CCAN, which we conduct live fire where we just use straw. We don't use pallets or anything that's a danger to anybody. And we've purchased an additional CCAN, which we're going to receive next week. And we would like to incorporate that into search and rescue training to be able to, change rooms or whatever the case may be. So we can have an evolution where we're conducting live fire training in one unit and then some search and rescue in another. So it keeps the group engaged and active. And there's only so many people that can do certain drills. So it keeps everyone in the loop. The installation and purchase of the new repeater, the repeater and the actual mobile that works with it is actually at Bearcom, provider, and they have to get basically programming for it. And the Ottawa power outage, they brought all their resources to bear up there, else we would have had it installed probably this week. Review and update of department SOGs, or standard operating guidelines. It's an annual thing. What you do is just to make sure that you're currently up to date on standards, best practices. And then finally, continue to strengthen the organization. And again, I think I mentioned that earlier about recruitment. We won't recruit in the summer because people are on vacation, and so we will look at that in the fall. Any questions?
Well, thanks very much, Chief. I'll open it up for comments. I see Ray's going to lead us off.
Well, thank you. The repeater, is it just a small box or is it a tower?
Through your worship to Councillor Young, what it is, we've got the size of, I would say, half the size of a shoebox, and then there's a mobile radio that goes with it. And what they do is they mount those inside the truck in a safe location. You don't actually use that mobile, you use your existing equipment. And what it does is it takes the signal, because we have some areas where we have communication gaps. We transmit to the mobile on the truck. The repeater hears it, takes it, boosts it, and sends it out to the towers, to the communication system. When we were doing our trial with a used unit, we were in Edwardsburg Cardinal with Chief Moore in Giant Tiger Warehouse, and we had calls there prior to doing the testing. And you could not, if I was inside the door and the truck was out in the parking lot, good radio because of building construction. And with this repeater, it improves our communications, improves our safety. And we also did the same with Chief Bowman that day, and when it is areas where he has gaps.
Yeah, even inside our grocery store, Yeg.
Yes.
I know you can't talk to the guys in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of dead spots down by the river.
Yes.
So they will be fixed as well.
Yes, we were in the grocery store in the freezer section right around the green giant peas area, and was able to get straight 5, which is great. Canadian Tire went back into the storage area, down on the waterfront especially, and it's because digital communications are basically kind of like a site. Even just a quick example, we had a call just down from the fire hall on Henry Street, and I was radioing the on-scene crew, and I actually got in the Tahoe and went and talked to them, because it's just topography, building construction, just different variables.
Okay, a little off topic of your report, but tonight, later on tonight, in the information packages, there's a resolution from
Newmarket?
yeah. And I feel strongly about this, that we should respond to it. I know you and your department and other departments along here feel the same way. And it's with regard to asking for more money for training facility, to send new people on training. It's very expensive for the individual to give up holiday time or personal time or whatever and get training outside the area. So I believe that's what this mandatory firefighting certificate issue is all about, is it not?
Through your worship, please. To Councillor Young. So the mandatory certification was part of the Solicitor General, the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs, and the Fire Marshal's office. So it doesn't matter where you are a firefighter, you have to be trained to NFPA standard firefighter 1. And I totally agree, it would be advantageous for council to support their motion going forward, their resolution, sorry, because of the increase in training materials. Like I said, we got a one-shot deal of, I think it was $5,300 to purchase training materials. Even a text is several $100. So when you talk about, and then bringing in, because we worked with Augusta recently with our firefighter 1 training, our first session, and we were able to decrease costs because we trained either in Augusta Station 1 or at the fire hall in Prescott, and the instructors were good with that. So we were able to have our members be able to go home in the evening, spend time with their family and things of that nature. But no, certainly agree that the impact of that decision, although being very forward moving insofar as consistent training. The price tag that was attached, is going to be attached to that is definitely going to impact.
So a volunteer firefighter in Prescott, in theory, will have the same training as a full-time fire department person in Ottawa.
Exactly, precisely.
Wow.
Well, it's the way things have been going for quite a while now with the legislative requirements that are just, you know, as they say, certain things flow downhill and we're just going to get hit with that as we move forward. But it's definitely something, if everyone's okay, we can bring that back for the next meeting for a fuller discussion on that resolution and seek support. I'm assuming that's where you're going with that.
Yes, I will when we get there. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, we're there.
Okay.
No point wasting time on that. Anything else, Ray, tonight?
That's good. Thank you. It's an excellent report.
Thank you. Other comments, questions for the chief this evening? Councillor Jansen.
Chief, you might have to correct me, but I think I understood some time ago that because we share our dispatch costs with other municipalities within United Counties, that at one time it was costing us money for the lack of getting incorrect dispatch calls. Is that, if I understand that correctly, I'm just wondering if that has been resolved and now that dispatch.
Teresa, are you thinking about the 911 issue? That was the major one
Okay,
that we had
yes.
for quite a number of years. That goes back to even my first term on council, and Rennie be familiar with that with Brockville and everything else. That was a major, but
Just wondering if that now is still an issue, or if it's gone, if it's been resolved.
Your worship.
Please.
Councillor Jansen. So the computer-aided dispatch system in Brockville, who supplies dispatch services, Leeds and Grenville, it has what's called a response time. Phone rings, it's 911, whatever the case may be, it brings up the address and then it brings up the proper municipality. So with our agreements that we work with our neighbors, that's going to be inputted into the system if it hasn't been already, because it does take time to load that into the system. But yes, the amount of calls that you're saying that are requiring our services might have had one since I've been here. And there are numerous times where you're at the mercy of someone on a cell phone who could be traveling on the 401 and they honestly don't know where they are. I can remember asking someone when I was in duty dispatch, where's your location? Well, I just passed Belleville just a little while ago. They could be in Cornwall, like, you know what I mean? Some of the people don't know, so they're doing their best. So there is a certain segment of calls that the dispatcher has to sometimes use their gut instinct and their training to try and nail down that call.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
that was, I think, that'd go back to our first term. When we were having the issues with 911, they'd scramble everyone. They'd
Exactly.
fire, police and ambulance to every single call. And that was a major issue. And things have been cleaned up a lot over the years. And I think Brockville's provided, the service has been excellent through Brockville Dispatch. And,
yes.
For these, he's been a fair number of years now. We've been with that since that arrangement was set up. So I think it's been quite successful from everything I've heard. So
Yes.
any comment, dispatch overall, right? It's good.
Actually going to be meeting with Chief Lazenby, who's the Brockville Fire Chief, this Friday morning, and we're just going to go over dispatch. Any concerns? It's in the agreement, to meet periodically. Now and since obviously working there, I see the work they do, the amount of calls they get. Like, for example, that windstorm that really didn't get us too bad.
Yeah, we really.
They dispatch North Grenville as well. So they get a lot of calls. So they're very professional at what they do.
And the costs have been held. I mean, we've basically, whatever the accommodation is for cost of living or whatever, that's all it's been, is it not? So it's been a good cost effective solution for us as well, just for anyone watching and curious about the cost of that. I think it's been quite successful there too. Other comments, questions? Seeing none, I've got just a couple real quick ones. I just wanted to thank yourself and everyone on staff, that CN derailment. I mean, we dodged a real bullet on that last year. It was very incredibly professionally handled all the way from all services and responding. But particularly when you think about they're volunteers, and you don't expect as much as everybody is prepared to go into those types of hazardous situations. When it's shown and it actually happens and you see that dedication, it's always impressive. So thanks again for that. I wanted to just comment on the staffing, because I think actually the number is very healthy here. I mean, we've always had a lot of like heavy experience, but we are seeing a little bit of turnover with some of the retirements, but that's good. That's healthy organization. And if you see the number of new folks that have been brought in from 1 to 5 years, I mean, it does balance out. So we're not really top heavy or bottom heavy. And it just shows how successful the organization is, the great reputation you have, and that you're able to bring the new volunteers on board. So that's something I think that really needs to be noted as well, because that shows overall organizational success, and the 1,200 hours of training. And I mean, it's a heavy commitment, but you're still getting people volunteering for it. So it just shows what a great organization you have there. Like we're always quick to sing your praises in here, but it's very clear that your praises are being sung across the entire community and the area as well, to get that level of commitment from volunteers on an ongoing basis. So hats off to all that you do there. And the other thing, I have to note this, because I was here at a time, well, Ray and I started at a time when the relationship wasn't as strong between town hall and the fire department. Not gonna, get into details or specifics there, but we've really strengthened that relationship to the point we've got the new fire hall, the new vehicles. We agreed earlier, this was last year now, on the new vehicle to set up the committee to review that, so we can continue that process. So it's a real strong team atmosphere there, and I think it shows up in everything that we do together with fire department and here at town hall. So thanks for your great role in that in this last year, and all the best for the rest of 22 and beyond. Thanks. And so thanks again for the report tonight.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Just did want to mention that, because that relationship, we can't say enough of the strength of it, and that just, if you don't have a good relationship there, you can't succeed in the other areas. So that's the foundation. So thanks again, Rennie, and all the best.
Thanks.
And we do have under 5 delegations, 1 delegation, as I mentioned this evening. That's under 5.1. We do have representatives of the Grenville Condominium Corporation on Water Street food truck. And these are the folks from Prescott Place, correct? Is it Mr. Sanchez? And there's Juan and Kathy Kelso. Good evening, folks. Good to see you both tonight.
Good evening. Thanks for having us on this evening.
So please, if you want to take us into the substance of your delegation tonight, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Okay. So I just want to thank the mayor and council for having us on this evening. And today I'm addressing you as the president of Grenville Corporation number 4, located at 235 Water Street. And as you know, many of our tenants have expressed concern about the mobile food trucks that are happening behind the Forwarders Museum. They addressed it to the board, and we requested that we address the town today, and maybe go over some of our concerns that can be addressed or earmarked for a future time. So I guess I can give you a little background history. 2 years ago, the Forwarders Museum was sold. And at that time, I want to thank the town that they invited us prior to the sale to discuss with the owner and go over, what the condition of the sales were. And at that time, we were told it was going to be an antique shop. Last year, what we noticed was a food vendor truck did position themselves in the back of the Forwarders Museum. And at that time in the board meetings, we thought it was event-based or temporarily based food vendors. Now, what we're hearing now, and I may be wrong, but it looks like the food vendors are going to be in that location for a more permanent length of time, and it looks like there'll be several vendors. So I guess my concern or the residents' concern towards us was we looked at the bylaws and we noticed that there were certain aspects of the bylaws that didn't address some of our concerns. So my formal request is, can we in the future look at these bylaws and maybe look at certain aspects of the bylaws that can help us move forward? Now, I know that the residents of the condominium want to see a vibrant waterfront. And I think it's a great idea that we're pushing tourism and other opportunities down to the water, but there's a lot of concern over the proximity or the location of where these vendors are, or how many vendors, or what type of vendors are going to be set up in that location.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanchez. Ms. Kelso, anything from you this evening? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm going to let Juan do the talking tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Sanchez, anything else?
No, without, I can go into the specifics, but I guess the request is, can we look at the current bylaws? Can we see if it addresses certain things? Now, I have down here gray water disposal, electrical, proximity to residential, the difference between a license agreement and maybe a temporary event permit, a short term. But I guess what my request is the town willing to look at these bylaws and maybe address them for any future development?
Thanks very much, Juan. At this point, I'll turn over. I know there have been some discussions with staff on exactly that matter. So, Mr. Armstrong, if you just want to give us the 360 on this and where we are with it. I know that you had discussions and we talked about bylaw after Ms. Kelso and I spoke, and the parking lot of Shoppers there a month and a half ago. I brought it back to staff as well and asked Mr. Armstrong to take a look at the bylaw in the particulars. I do have some real sympathy for the residents down there, just with the proximity with the trucks and their homes. But Mr. Armstrong, please, can you let us know where we are in the bylaw?
Certainly, thank you very much. So bylaw 2-95, so it gives you an indication that this bylaw is a couple years old, that we're dealing with. It concerns licensing overall, but in particular, section 3 deals with refreshment vehicles. So there's 4 type vehicles that it addresses. One is a motorized refreshment vehicle. And really the concept there is that you're making the product in the vehicle itself. The second is an ancillary vehicle where you're just, you're not making the item, but it's pre-made, or you're just serving it and that sort of thing. That we feel is the most appropriate type of definition for this, realizing that it's not motorized by itself, but if it had a truck attached to it, then it would be motorized. Then there's 2 other, which are non-motorized, both of which really speak to being propelled by a person. So you're talking about a bicycle type vendor at that point, or a barbecue vendor. So we really didn't feel that those 2 were applicable. When it comes to the motorized refreshment vehicle, and when you're making it product inside the vehicle, such as a trip truck, those types of things, there's a number of rules that it stipulates. It has to be at least 10 meters away from the roadway, can't have permanent utility connection, those types of things. But because this is an ancillary vehicle, those particular parts of the bylaw that were in 95 don't necessarily apply. So what we did do is take a look at what is required in the bylaw, and currently it meets all of the requirements as stipulated there. When we went and visited several members of the condo corporation, as well as the manager, and we explained this, had a good productive discussion. Our manager of building bylaw had a further discussion with the property owner, and they had made some adjustments. So they've moved it a little bit further to the north, more towards the building, because it was in the sight line that was for several members of the condo corporation, as well as just addressing where the electrical currently runs, and making sure that there's lids and that sort of thing on the garbage cans, so it reduces the chance of birds and whatnot getting in with that. We're also addressing the gray water issue.
But I do agree that this bylaw is getting up to 27 years old and really could use a revamp. And there's no reason why we couldn't do that throughout this year, with our goal of having it in place for early in 2023. So that way, any new vendors that apply, and all of the licenses are only 1-year licenses, that we would have a new set of rules going into 2023 to be able to apply for these types of requests. But certainly, or from a staff perspective, we're more than happy to commit to revamping that. We're more than happy to work with the condo corporation and incorporating their thoughts and ideas around exactly what some of those changes would be and how we could best address them. And at the end of the day, we're also bound by the rules as set out by the Health Act. So the health unit gets involved, particularly when there's speed, as well as the fire department gets involved as well from the fire perspective. So between the town, the health unit, the fire department, those are all internal as well as operations that we make sure that we have the discussions with. And we're happy to also include the condo corporation to get some real life feedback, because that's one of the very few areas where we do have residential abutting commercial property. And I think sometimes that wasn't necessarily considered in the original bylaw. I think we do need to thoroughly consider it and review.
Yeah, so I guess the bottom line is our hands are kind of tied this season with regards to the bylaw, unless there's something that's
right. I think, from my perspective, it would be, so anyone that's been issued a license, we wouldn't be able to go back and change the rules for now. Anyone that is looking for a license certainly would work with that. I believe the property owner at 201 Water has indicated that they are looking at a second truck. And we really need to understand where that would be, whether it's going to meet the guidelines or not. We also understand that might be one where the product is actually being made inside, so a different set of rules would be applied to that versus the current one that's there, simply because they're only serving at that point. So certainly we're committed to making sure that we're following the current bylaw, as well as revising the bylaw for future permits.
so just the one license has been granted for this season
particular
so far, but there's another one potentially pending.
Correct. And we haven't received an application, to the best of my knowledge, as of last week, but we have heard the indication that they are looking at one.
Okay. Any questions, comments from members of council? Councilor McConnell.
Through Mayor Todd to Matthew, if I can,
Please.
the secondary truck, when it comes in, if it happens to have an external generator, where are we on something like that?
So the placement of the truck will have to be at least 10 meters off the roadway. So where the current truck is, it would have to be certainly much more up towards the building. They could do a temporary, there's nothing in the bylaw that doesn't allow them to do a temporary connection, but they wouldn't be allowed to have a permanent connection to utilities. But certainly the bylaw doesn't necessarily speak to that sort of thing. So we'd have to rely on the noise bylaw, which we also know is fairly long in the tooth and could also require an update.
Weren't we looking at that as this next step after property standards last year? That was because we did touch on it a little bit with one property in town where there was a significant, same thing, generator running overnight. And this would obviously be a lot more problematic right downtown in the use of a generator there.
Correct.
Sorry to interrupt, Councilor McConnell. Anything further? Comments at all?
No, I was just concerned. I mean, the gelato truck, we all enjoy gelato, but we all don't happen to have a condo on a front yard right behind it. That's not very good to be in that position. I would be more concerned though if another one moved in and was running a generator right next to my front door, or if there is a balcony, a couple of balconies on the upper floors that face east. And I was wondering if there's anything that we have any regulations that would prevent a generator. Apparently we don't at this time.
Something I think we'd have to look at, whereas I don't think Mr. Armstrong's saying yay or nay, but I think that's something we'd have to examine under the noise bylaw.
Absolutely. So the noise bylaw would certainly limit the running of the generator to certain hours. But we'd have to take a more thorough look at it to just understand exactly what would be allowed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McConnell. Councillor Jensen.
Through you, Mayor Todd, to Matthew, if I could. Matthew, you said that you did approach the truck and they have since moved it, and so that really they were understandable, empathetic to the concerns and willing to work for a workaround.
Absolutely. So I think they have addressed some of the issues. The property owner has confirmed that they will address a couple of more of the issues. I'm not sure it's exactly all the way to where the condo corporation was asking it to be moved, but certainly is further north than what it was. And so we're definitely committed to working with the property owner and the condo corporation to try to see if we can find a happy medium and mitigate some of the annoyances that there are.
Thank you. I love that their request included that they too want a vibrant waterfront. So it with a workaround that's pleasing to all parties, hopefully that will be the case, right? Because it does draw, just like our Prescott pop-ups will draw more activity, positive activity.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shankar.
This question is actually for Juan and Kathy. The changes that have been made to the gelato truck by moving it back, has that been favorable for you guys? Is that acceptable?
To me, the problem is an antiquated bylaw, and I'll give you some examples. Currently, right now, there is no wastewater gray disposal. So it gets thrown either on our sidewalk, on our grass, or right beside the parking lot. Also, now that this is not an event-based or short-term, there's electrical wires that are bolted onto our sidewalk, you know, as a semi-permanent, I don't know, you'd have to look at it, but it's bolted on there, and there's loose wires, electrical wires. The other issue I have is, I'd say 10 feet away is where our waste management comes and takes out our garbage for the building once or twice a week, which is very close. And if you add another food truck, it would be right on top. My other concern is when you go down that hill, it's blind for a second. And while the food truck is out of the way, all the people that want the food will be right on the road. Also, our entrance for our parking is 3 feet away from where the people will be. So yes, some of these are being addressed with the current bylaw, but my request was maybe we can look at the bylaw and look at things like proximity to residential, or even the difference between a short-term event agreement versus what this looks to be all summer long with semi-permanent fixtures. Last year, in regards to the generator, the food truck did come in last year and they did have a generator. At first, it was right beside the generator, and I got quite a lot of complaints from the residents. Then it was moved between our building and the Forwarders Museum, which still made it loud, and there was a lot of complaints again by the residents. But we knew that it was short-term, or that it wasn't going to be all summer long. So to answer your question, yes, it answers the question with the existing bylaws, but my request would be to look at something more into the future where we can look at that whole waterfront for development.
Okay, thank you.
I could comment on one thing, if that's
Please.
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
The compromise, the moving it is better, and I believe it's better for everyone from a safety issue. I really was concerned about children being hit by vehicles, and this setup is safer, but I still have a very major concern with the gray water. they were attempting to dump their tank on a daily basis, even though it was back on the grass behind the museum. But now they're not dumping the gray water at all. The gray water is running freely from the tank into the parking area. And I have pictures of it from Friday evening and Saturday evening. So I just don't understand what happened with that concern. I know that the owner wasn't happy. The owner of the gelato truck wasn't happy. I wouldn't call his reaction empathetic, but I do believe it's a good compromise in this situation. But I am still concerned about the gray water. But other than that, I agree with Juan that we really would like to look forward to next year and having some better guidelines in place.
Thanks, Kathy. Councilor Shankar, anything further?
No, that's good.
Thank you. Any comment, the gray water concern?
We attempted to deal with the gray water last week. That's not acceptable from what I'm hearing now. So we will absolutely deal with it again this week.
Thank you.
That's Matt. Councilor Burton, please.
Just to add about the gray water, as a camper, I'm sure that they can go and purchase, I think it's called our carboy, and they can dump the gray water into that and take it home and dispose of it as they please. They can definitely do that, and it's really an easy fix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you, Kathy. Like they shouldn't be dumping the gray water.
Yeah.
But I think that's an easy fix.
And it's unfortunate that there seems to be a tension between us, because the whole thing from start to even to now was kind of done like a secret COVID operation. There was no communication or with anyone, and it was just brought in and snuck in as tight up to our property as possible, and it just made us feel not good. It just wasn't done in a nice way.
It's disappointing to hear, because in a small town, you expect the best of your neighbors and would hope the best of your neighbors, but we'll do what we can to rectify that and the other concerns.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions from members of council? Seeing none, anything else from staff? Just very quickly myself, as I mentioned off the top, and as I mentioned to Kathy when I talked to her 5-6 weeks ago about this, definitely empathize with the concerns. We've certainly been caught with an older bylaw that never really anticipated these sorts of vehicles in the downtown. We've always taken the example. I mean, we've had, I think on a few occasions over the last 10, 12, 13 years, requests for chip trucks in the downtown, even during on town property. So we had more authority just to say no. Chip trucks during the Santa Claus parade, and we've always stayed away from that for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. But the one thing, this is right adjacent to a residential area. There is the possibility of some real congestion down there. Kathy did mention her concerns about the one truck. We get into two and you've got like a good sized patio down there. We have had issues with, call it what it is, idiots racing up and down that street at times during the night. I've heard it in my house. I'm sure they've heard it down there much louder because it's right on top of them. So that is something else that does have to be a bit of a concern. And the other thing I will add that hasn't been brought up so far is the BIA has to be part of this discussion as well, because I think if you were to bring in a chip truck at some point, or anybody that did fried foods, I think there's at least one business in the downtown core that would raise a significant objection to that right off the bat. And as it is even now, there's some conflict there. And I'm not saying we have to rig the game in favor of existing businesses, but when you have existing brick and mortar that pay taxes, that have been in the downtown a long time, like Tim's Fish and Chips, like Katarina's, I think you've got to be cautious of what you do there for the temporaries and the summertime. As much as they can bring a lot of vibrancy to your community and bring a lot of people to town, I'm all for it, but there's got to be a bit of a balance, and I hope we can find that when we review the bylaw. But I do think the BIA needs to be consulted on this as well. They may be all for it. I don't recall, Councillor Jansman, do you recall? I don't recall this coming up as a formal discussion. I know Kevin Bunce has raised it in the past, but I don't know if he's raised it in part of a meeting, but he's been quite supportive, and a number probably would be, but I don't think we've gotten any actual commentary from the BIA board overall. So, I mean, that's something we got to watch, because we do have a lot of restaurants in the downtown. They've had a hell of a time coming out of COVID as well. And, you know, you just got to be cautious. You don't overload the competition. I mean, was it 2 summers ago, we didn't give the kid the hot dog license for the hot dog cart because we wanted to protect the downtown residences. And now, so it all just sees, I hope we can work out a good compromise here. But I just wanted to say, I definitely feel for the residents, and I just think it's something we need to work on. And it sounds like we've just got the one license that's locked in for this year, potentially a second one, but now we have some of the concerns. So staff will take that back if and when the second licensee comes forward, and we'll work on something. Is everyone okay with that, by the way, in terms of, I don't know if we need a motion on this, but staff direction just to work in the bylaw. Mr. Armstrong has given us his advice that we should be working at it, and we could have a concern. So everyone okay with that as the major takeaway tonight? Seeing a lot of nodding heads. So we'll work on that and hopefully bring it back as we move through the summer. Even Juan's nodding there. So we must be on the right track.
I just want to thank yourself and the rest of the council for giving us this moment to express ourselves, and I look forward to telling all the residents, working forward with the town in the future.
Thanks, Juan, and thanks, Kathy, for coming in tonight. We always want to be pro-business in town. We want to bring people into the downtown, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't negatively impact on residents, and of course, existing businesses as well. So we got to find that balance here. And from what you're telling us tonight, we don't have that balance yet, but we'll do our best to get there as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you both for calling in tonight. Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so all good. All righty, moving on to 6 minutes of the previous council meeting. That's the minutes from May 16th, 2022. Recommendation reads council minutes dated May 16th, 2022 be accepted as presented. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councilor McConnell, seconded by Councilor Tankar. Any discussion on that set of minutes from May 16th? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carried. 7 communications and petitions, nothing formally on there tonight. 8 consent reports. We do have 3 items there tonight. We have the information package. Councilor Young has already mentioned the one item under 4. I don't think we need unless Ray really wants to go down that road, I don't think we need a motion for that. We'll just agreement that staff will bring that back for our discussion.
Might as well have a motion, don't you think?
Well, however you want to do it. I'm good either way. Well, so why don't we just split that up then? So we'll do the information package first. So the motion would read, we'll do 2 and 3 as one motion. If everyone, actually, I'll poll everybody now. So we'll split 8.1 off so we can refer to the motion on 4 with the new market resolution. 8.2, 8.3, both are down just for information purposes. Those will be brought back to the next council meeting for more fulsome discussion. Is everyone okay just leaving those 2 items as part of the consent report tonight? Okay, seeing some nodding heads. So under 8.1 with the information package, motion would read that all items listed on the consent under the information package be accepted as presented. And can we just add an addition onto that, Councilor Young, that we would bring back the town of Newmarket resolution in support of mandatory firefighter certifications as presented as part of the info pack. Lindsay, you'll wordsmith that better than, is everyone okay with that? Ray, did you want to speak to that any further? Or?
No, I think I've addressed everything that we're talking about. It's just the province is requiring more training for volunteer firefighters. So we're asking them to help with the financial burden that it will be on small municipalities like ours.
Absolutely. Good time for that dialogue too, as we also have the emergency services, whatchamacallit, I can never think of it, that we did with counties. that's going to be implemented, and there's going to be recommendations coming forward from that, I'm sure, from a provincial level. Then we have the Police Services Board thing that was kind of in limbo now, but that's going to come back. So this is all part and parcel of, all this could add up to a lot of expense in small municipalities. So it's good to get the voice out there. So Councillor Young, you're good to make that motion then, sir? And could I have a seconder, Councillor Burton? Any other comments, questions on anything else in the information package this evening? Seeing no comments, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. And so we do have the recommendation that all items listed under the consent report section of the agenda, now amended to read 8.2 and 8.3, be accepted as presented. And 8.2 is the draft asset management plan. 8.3 is that report on the pedestrian crossings evaluation. Both will require well, the second one for sure, and I think the first one as well, some significant discussion on that evening of June the 20th. So we'll have to make sure that agenda is lean in other ways. So if everyone's okay with that, could I get a mover for that recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Ostrander, seconded by Councillor Jansman. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. Committee reports, nothing tonight. 10 mayor's portion of the evening. Wanted to comment just briefly on that meeting of the three councils we had last week, and I understand Augusta has said that they're good for the 29th. We haven't heard from Edwardsburg Cardinal yet, though. Was that or
Just that note that the majority of their group is available on the 20th as well.
So we've got all three of them basically, and we are having it in Augusta. Are they hosting this thing? Okay, excellent. Okay, so that shows the progress that's been made. We'll have to hear back from, particularly from Edwardsburg Cardinal, because they heard a lot of new information last week, but it was great to have them around the table. And that's hopefully the first step in a broader partnership that will allow them to catch up to some of the work we've done with Augusta. And hopefully we'll have three partners around the table and not just two in the not too distant future. So good stuff. And I want to thank all members of council for supporting this from their councils as well. It was a good meeting. Really good positive energy in the room, and I think we can make some good things happen with it. And just comment on Saturday briefly, want to congratulate Katarina's on their second anniversary. I know a good chunk of council was there. I was unfortunately unable to attend, but that was great to honor what's become one of the more successful new businesses in the downtown. Done incredible work down there. They've added to the menu dramatically. For people that think it's just a coffee shop, it's not. Go on in and check it out. Great treats, great ice cream, great food. And the work that John has done with his pastry, he's a pastry chef they've hired, and just phenomenal stuff in there. Dangerous to the waistline, but it's still damn good stuff. And also, of course, Laughs at the Leo on Saturday night. Again, I was away and couldn't attend it. But I know Brent McAllister did an incredible job on that all along. I think $100,000 was raised for the arena. A lot of great, generous people out there just adding to that total. That's I don't know the total now because I know a few things have changed, but we're around that 3 million mark. And the arena is, of course, going up quite well. I've had a few questions about that lately, even today, a question from the media regarding the status, and we probably should. We talked about having another sort of open house at some point towards the end of June, and it'd be good to see the progress then. And maybe we could even do a media availability for something like that if possible, because I think that we get some good coverage on that from the radio stations, Recorder and Times, and so on. As long as it's doable with, in a construction zone. But I think that would be an exciting thing that the media would get behind. Really disappointed I couldn't make Laughs, but as some of you know. Not too disappointed because I managed to score tickets to Paul McCartney down in Syracuse. So it was kind of a once in a lifetime concert, and it was an absolute spectacular evening. So great time here in Prescott on Saturday night, and I certainly had a great time in Syracuse on Saturday night. Thanks again to Brent McAllister and everyone that put on such a great event here for our new arena. So moving along to item 11, we'll go to outside boards, committees, and commissions, and start as always with Councilor Burton.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I'm going to piggyback on Laughs at the Leo first. It was just overwhelming seeing the generosity that people came. There was laughter, there were smiles, there was just a wonderful evening raising funds in our community for a well-needed rink. Brett McAllister and the whole fundraising team went above and beyond. Donations of silent auction items, live auction items. It just shows the generosity of our community as well, that people who couldn't be there wanted to donate for the silent or live auction. So well done, everybody involved. I did make it to Katrina's on Saturday, and the cake was humongous. It was beautiful. It was, if you haven't been to Katrina's for some baking goods lately, you gotta go. So we congratulated Nicole and Mike and you have names?
John.
John, yes, thank you. Yeah, it was a wonderful time. Councilor Shankar and I and Mr. Ostrander were able to go to Tim Hortons on Saturday morning, and I think I saw Mr. Young there as well, Councilor Young, later on.
When would you not see Ray at?
Oh, I know. It was packed. It was packed. Yes, it was very early in the morning. They had two different organizations there. Spiders Express. Gori and I and Mike had an opportunity to talk to Bruce and his wife. It was his first year organizing something like this, and they were organizing it to raise funds for Tiny Hearts at Chio. And people were coming from Gatineau to Kingston just to be a part of it. And he said, those three spiders that just showed up, we didn't even know they were coming, but they wanted to come and donate some money and go for the ride. And then the Cow Patty boys were there, and I shouldn't say boys because there was a lot of female bikers too. They were raising funds for a local family that lost everything in a fire, and one of their own has cancer. So they were raising funds, doing a poker run through the communities, different communities. And there's a cemetery board AGM this week too. If anybody would like to attend, it's at 1 o'clock on Wednesday.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Councillor Jasmine.
Thank you. The AGM for the BIA was on May 31st, and unfortunately, due to the weather forecast, it had to go virtual versus the hope that we could have it at the amphitheater, but which is disappointing because there was a lot of work. It was obvious a lot of work was put forth, and it just loses something in the virtual venue. However, it got done, and it needs to get done, so that was good, and the information got presented. Overall, I thought that one of the new board members, one of her comments kind of said it all when she said, until she became a board member, she had really no idea what the BIA did and how much they do. So especially coming out of COVID, I have remarked here and there different ways, but they really hit the ground running and very, very much high activity. So it's a nice group to be associated with, for sure. And I was fortunate enough to go to Laughs at the Leo as well, and kind of overwhelmed with the amount of money that was raised. So that was awesome. And just a thanks to the staff as well, because no doubt that meant a lot of extra work and time for them as well. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jasmine. One quick comment, the BIA AGM and actually ongoing operations. I want to thank Dana. I want to thank Justin. I want to thank Elizabeth. Staff has been doing a tremendous amount of added work on the BIA these last couple of years, because the BIA has not had that employee that we've had in the past. They did a lot of work for that AGM, including having to move it inside after the threat of inclement weather, and just needs to be acknowledged, because a lot of the BIA activity now is being powered underneath. Volunteers have been fantastic. It's a strong board, but we are providing a lot of staff support as well. So hats off to Dana, Justin, and Elizabeth on that, because they've done great work as well. Thank you. Councillor Connell, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Todd. Last Tuesday night, I had the pleasure of attending a get-together in the backyard of one of the members of the library board, and we were celebrating and wishing farewell to our librarian, Jane McGuire, who has been with us for 31 years, which is certainly a very long time. And she's done a very nice job down at the library. She was with the library through the last renovation at the town hall here. And of course, seen a big change in her 31 years. Previous plans took me out of town for much of the past weekend, so I missed the activities that everybody else has been describing. It sounds like they were very worthwhile. Shakespeare, I was down at the amphitheater today doing a little work on the castle. Shakespeare has started working on the amphitheater stage in preparation for the season to come. And I know we're all looking forward to that. It's going to be a great summer of entertainment, pretty much solid all the way through. And that's it for me, Mayor John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. Councillor Ostrander.
Hey, Your Worship. The 3 events on Saturday have already been well documented by others. I attended all 3, and it was just one of those Saturdays you had to be around here to experience it. It was a fun time, and especially the laughs of the Leo, of course, were. I remarked to Councillor Burton, pardon me, before the meeting that it was kind of the almost exact what we had talked about at the committee level about 2 years ago, two plus maybe now. And Mr. McAllister needs to be given a big shout out for bringing it together. It was his idea, and it worked. And given the COVID time we were going through when we first discussed it, I was a little skeptical, but boy, it was an event that when we talk about the arena in years to come, we will talk about the event that, let's say, helped turn the corner and head to better times and that. So, not much else. We've had to give our Ukrainian family a little bit of space. They were being overwhelmed with attention and various things. Their kids are absolutely in love with St. Mark's School, and they've even had mom and dad up to a couple of things that they've had, getting towards the end of the school year now. They have their little plays and whatnot. So that's gone well, and I was interested to hear the Prescott condominium group come and talk about the gelato truck at the riverfront, and just kind of raise that issue because it's one of those things that we seem to get something about the food trucks at least once a year in the good weather that we have to sort of work around, or at least make some efforts to make it more plausible for everybody. So anyway, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ostrander. Councillor Schenker.
I don't want to repeat everything that Councillor Burton and Jasmine and Ostrander just said, but it was a good day. It was nice to see Prescott be the center of attention, with the Cowbody boys coming, the two-wheelers, and then the Spider Express with their 3 wheels, and then just the laughs of the Leo was just excellent. One quick example, there was a mask donated by Frank Cipra, who's well known for making a lot of pro masks for pro players and international players. And he donated a mask that ended up selling for $10,200, which is just phenomenal. So there was some deep pockets there. And
what are you going to do with the mask?
I did have my hand up to start, but then it went down real quick. I think Jane pulled it down.
If you have room on your shelf, you will find it.
Fantastic. Along that line, we also had the Rotary Club from Brockville on Friday had their annual tournament in Prescott, and they donated a check for $2,500 to the rink. So that was really good as well. So it was a good week. It was a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Young.
Thank you, Brett. I also attended the 3 events on Saturday, and I can tell you that the Saturday night reminded me, being the old fellow that I am, of Friday nights of Loyalist Days, where so many people come back just for the one night. And you were looking at people that you haven't seen in a long, long time, including a very famous boater that used to keep his boat here, and other NHL stars that came with them. It was a great night. Anyway, I attended the excuse me, Board of Management meeting of St. Lawrence Lodge, and things are going well at the lodge. Our first 4 months of the year where our budget is quite acceptable. The 2 major construction projects that we have are taking shape, and we will be moving forward with them by the fall. And at the time a week ago, we were not in outbreak. I don't know whether that's changed since, but things are going well. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young, and thanks everyone for the updates. So on to item 12, staff portion this evening. 12.1 staff report 64-2022. That's fire department update for Q1 22. Chief, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I think you touched on a lot of that during your update earlier, but was there anything else you wanted to pull out of that report for everyone's information tonight?
I think it's our regular, just basically our regular maintenance, our training, and just a number of calls. You know, the next report will have some more information about, you know, maintenance and annual testing and inspections, apparatus and whatnot. But I'm very pleased with our new members and the level of participation and the dedication of our current staff members or department members to be able to, you know, there's training and then there's showing people the ropes. So we've got that, and I think as you remarked earlier, we have a nice blend of new members as well as our senior members as well.
It's actually a great point, because the number of first-year members get that onboarding period where the experienced guys, you know, people just assume it's more of an integration, but there's a lot of training and there's a lot of, like, it's a lot of added work to the existing guys to bring the new ones on. So, you know, congratulations to them for taking on that added training as well, because it just adds up over the course of the year, I'm sure, bringing these guys on board. So good thing to know. Thank you, sir. So 12.2 is staff report 65-2022 proposed community improvement plan amendments. Recommendation reads that council directs staff to proceed with the scheduling of the statutory open house to obtain public feedback to the proposed amendments of the community improvement plan for July 11th, 2022. Could I ask for a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Jansman, seconded by Councillor Burton. Ms. Valentine, did you want to take us through the report here? I guess Mr. Armstrong, you're here as well. So whoever's off first with a review of the CIP amendments, proposed CIP amendments.
Thank you for your worship, council. So I think Matthew and I are going to tag team this tonight. So I'll be focusing more on the information recommendations coming from the tables. And then Matthew will take you through some of the other recommended changes that will follow each of the tables. We will start with, well, just first of all, I do want to say we have presented the potential amendments to the Planning Advisory Committee, received some excellent feedback from that committee, and we've managed to incorporate some of those comments received as part of this report that's coming before you tonight. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the other comments that we get through the public sessions as well. These amendments have really been based on a combination of feedback from existing businesses and property owners that have managed to take advantage of the program, as well as members of the BIA, Planning Advisory Committee, and then just general community feedback that we get. So I think we've got a very well-rounded set of comments that we've been looking at as part of these recommendations for amendments. So I'll take you through the downtown Riverwalk district. This is really I would say where we received the majority of our applications under the program. So you'll see there's quite a few amendments recommended under this category. So just to remind you, the downtown area and Riverwalk District essentially covers the area that we know as the DIA. So that is your downtown core, your King, mostly King portion of Water, and some pieces of a certain portion of Edward Street as well. So it's a kind of distinct neighborhood that we're speaking of here. And as it currently stands, we have a number of grants available under the program. First is the Facade Grant. So that's a one-time grant of up to 50% of eligible costs, which provides funding to improve the actual exterior facade storefront appearance of the building. So it currently sits at $5,000, and we're recommending that be increased to $10,000. That would also incorporate some accessibility options within that amount. But we're also finding a lot, it's just $5,000 does not go a long way, especially once you get into facade, potentially repointing of bricks, and you know, it's very limited. Even a coat of paint and some lighting can very quickly eat into well.
COVID-19 inflation's put all work up dramatically as well. So this just actually may just keep up with the inflation.
And it's something that a lot are seeing, as well as just issues with finding sourcing contractors.
That as well.
Work has been another significant issue. So we're recommending an increase up to $10,000 under this category. For signage, very similar recommendation. We're finding with, you know, the expectations, the standards that we're trying to implement in the downtown, when you look at incorporating things like raised lettering, some nice gooseneck lighting, or some recessed lighting that really elevates these properties. Again, $1,000 just really doesn't go a long way. So we're recommending increasing that to $5,000. And then for the accessibility, this is an area that we really haven't seen a lot of uptake on. Accessibility, this category was really intended to be for those properties that maybe need to look at constructing ramps or providing new accessibility standards to allow people to have easier egress into their properties. Problem is the tightness of the properties themselves and the room that they have to play with on the sidewalk to look at putting ramps in really doesn't leave much options for that. If you look at the visitor center and museum, the extent of the sidewalk that we actually had to take over to accommodate a ramp, there's just simply no way that every single property could do that. So we're looking at more portable options to improve their accessibility, and we're recommending as part of this that accessibility shift into the facade program. So it could still be used for accessibility related items, but as well, the broader facade improvements that I think we're really trying to encourage. And I think that most property owners and business owners are really expressing the most interest in. And then we also have our interior commercial category. So it currently sits at $3,000, recommending that increases to $5,000. Again, the $3,000 just really doesn't, you know, it's a very small dent, and even the $5,000 wouldn't, you know, really be a significant amount when you look at the grand scheme and what a lot of businesses, property owners are having to put in. Even for a business that is coming in to open strictly just a business in the commercial space, let alone looking at a multitude of property improvements. We're seeing upwards of $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 and just minor leasehold improvements that businesses are having to implement. So again, recommending that we increase this amount. And interior residential, not recommending a change to this amount at this time, because we do feel the recommended increase for the loan program that you'll see later on is a way to address some of these residential improvements that we're really hoping to see. And then our building permit application fees, recommending a bit of a change here too. It currently sits at $500, which is just a flat rate. It's a one-time $500 fee. And we're recommending that change up to $1,000 or the equivalent of 10% of the building permit fee, whichever amount would be higher. Because again, we're seeing a lot more extensive projects being undertaken, and the $500 building permit fee is very nominal in comparison to what applicants are actually having to pay increment fees to move their project forward. And then the interest-free loan program, this currently sits at up to $20,000. It's an interest-free loan available over a period of 5 years, repayable over a period of 5 years. And we're recommending that increase from $20,000 up to $100,000. And that would also, with a caveat in there, not to exceed the 25% of the total project value. Because the intent isn't just to provide loan funds, it really needs to be tied to the project itself and be dedicated for that and kind of match what the overall value of those improvements is going to be. And then we're also have the property tax increment program, and we're recommending no changes to that. It would essentially stay the same. We think the offering is very good as it sits. It's the tax increment that essentially offsets the increased taxation that comes from the impact reassessment that naturally comes when properties are approved. As soon as a building permit is taken out, it triggers that reassessment. So that helps offset those property tax increases from that process. And then I'll pass it over to Matthew at this time. He's going to take you through some of the other changes that we're recommending to the downtown category.
Thank you very much, Dan, and to council. So one of the things that the Planning Advisory Committee suggested is having a purpose to each of the areas in each of the programs. So the purpose of area 1 is to rejuvenate and revitalize the Riverwalk District. That aligns with our strategic plan as well as our Prescott economic development strategy. So both of which have come before council. The suggestion was to expand the eligibility area all the way up Edward Street to Wood Street. Currently, I believe it stops at approximately Dibble or James Street, so just short of Wood Street. And then on King Street, taking it from Sophia all the way to East Street. So I believe currently it ends at East Street, but it certainly stops well short of Sophia on the west end. So that was a recommendation there. Another one is to have the applicant have a commercial portion on the property. So now that we have allowed certain properties in that area to be residential only, then we want to make sure that there is it's a mixed use property that we're supporting and not simply a residential property.
Active commercial?
Or
just zone, because that could get us into.
Yep, so very good point. So it's we'll work on the wording to make sure that.
Yeah, just because you could end up giving money for something that's primarily residential and then upset other residents, but especially with historic homes that in the area. So thank you.
Adopting a new sign and lighting design guidelines with a checklist to develop to the fall, so bringing that back to council for consideration, and adopting new facade guidelines with a checklist to be developed for 2023. And so there again, wanting to make sure that any project that we're supporting are following the guidelines and adhering to them, as opposed to ending up with something perhaps that we weren't envisioning as and certainly don't want to use CIP funds to support that. Another is to allow multiple facade applications for those corner properties on King and Edward, King and Center, and King and George. Obviously, they have more than one wall that is facing out to a street, and wanting to determine if that's available for them and being able to really take advantage of that. Issuing loan funds as installments versus lump sum payments, and in accordance with the completion of pre-established phases that align with building inspections, so as opposed to expenses incurred. So one of the things that we find, a lot of people will the $20,000 and then get towards the end of the project and they're still having to spend money, but they have several phases to go through from a building perspective. So we would actually align the those payouts with the pre-approved points where building inspections have to occur. So even if you spend all of the money in that first phase, you would only, let's say, get 20% if there's 5 particular phases that you need to go through from a building inspection perspective. So that way we can make sure that those projects are coming to completion and not relying on all of those funds right at the beginning. Another one is to extend project completion deadlines from 12 months to 24 months. And in support of that, incorporating grant repayment requirements that if the project isn't finished within 24 months of the approval, or if the project or the property sells and changes use within 24 months of approval. And the grant obviously wouldn't have been completed and done for what the purpose was. Finally, the last item is permitting multiple funding applications for property. And that could be for splitting, obviously the signage is more of a tenant item. The residential side would be more of the owner item, and then splitting up each of those facets of the particular program to either be tenant or owner initiated. Being able to support additional renovation requests within or with no less than 36 months, where there's a change in perhaps a tenant or that sort of thing. And then if nothing else is applicable, there's currently no provision in the bylaw or in the program that allows for another application. And so we're saying there'd be at least 5 years between applications to be able to support new projects on each property. So that's the sum total of area 1, which is obviously the one that we have the largest uptake and the most changes. So more than happy to answer questions at this point, or we can keep going.
Any comments, questions? Right?
Very aggressive. I like an awful lot of the suggestions. When would it be brought back to council for a vote?
So I believe we're looking at August at this point. So we would have the meeting in July. We would take some time.
Public meeting.
Then it, I believe, has to go to planning advisory in early August, and then it would come to council for final consideration or another consideration in August 22nd.
All right. If we got a slew of applications, can we handle it within this year's budget?
So there is a suggestion here that there was $70,000 set aside into fiscal policy. 30,000 of that went to support the river route transit. So I'm suggesting that another 40,000 be put over and moved to the fiscal, sorry, not the fiscal advisor policy, but to the community improvement plan reserve. And that would, I believe, leave about 60-some thousand in that reserve for the remainder of this year.
Okay. I would really love to think that we might get another $400,000 or $500,000 project in that area. Can we come up with $100,000 interest-free loan?
So in terms of grants and loans, it doesn't go against the reserve, it just becomes a receivable. And then when it's repaid, it doesn't become an income statement item because it just becomes a receivable and then paid back to the organization.
Yeah, and we can afford it out of our
correct
general fund. Yeah. Okay. All right, you're going to get into area 5 in a moment. I think that will spark some more conversation.
Okay. So
I'll segue into the second area, which is employment land. So we do have some revision recommended under this. A lot just to remain the same though, because we're finding, the program is working the way it currently stands. I think one of the biggest areas that we're seeing potential interest in would be the increase in the loan program. And the property tax increment is a really big piece to that. So for the interior commercial for accessibility, no changes recommended. It currently sits at 3,000. We recommend that carry forward. Exterior commercial and industrial, this is currently sits at $2,000 for the grant, and we're recommending that this increase to 5,000. Again, just a reminder, all grants are one-time matching grant of up to 50%. So anytime I speak to grants, that's what we're referring to is up to 50%. of the eligible cost to a maximum of, say, 5,000. So if the applicant only spent 7,500, then the grant would be prorated to 35 or 3750. And then again, the building permit application fees, recommending a similar change from $500 flat rate to up to $1,000 or 10% of the building permit fee, whichever is higher. And that brings me into the interest-free loan program, very similar to the downtown, recommending an increase from $20,000 up to $100,000, not to exceed 25% of the total project value. And then for the property tax increment program, no change recommended. That is the program starting at 100%, increasing by 20% each year for a period of 5 years to offset the increase in municipal taxes that comes through the impact reassessment. And then finally, we are proposing a new category under the employment area, which would be a streetscape grant. So this would be a new one-time matching grant, up to 50% maximum for landscaping, pedestrian amenities, and ground signage. And it would be a maximum of $5,000. And the intent of this is really to try and increase the visual appeal of the commercial industrial properties. I'm sure that we could all think of a few industrial properties that could use just a little bit of landscaping, maybe some nice signage, just to really make them, give them a bit more presence in the community and really kind of speak to that pride that we have in having those industries, because there's something we want to celebrate, right? And I think that, as these industries are running their businesses, they may not always think about those things like signage and beautification, where if we offer a little bit of grant in that regard, I think it might encourage them to think along those lines and maybe make some of those improvements. And that's it for the actual table. So I'll pass it over to Matthew to cover some of the other changes we're recommending.
This area would be to increase employment opportunities in the town of Prescott through expansion and attraction of businesses. This aligns with the Prescott strategic plan as well as the Prescott economic development strategy. So increase the area to cover the entire portions of town where industrial commercial use is on the property. The applicant must be able to demonstrate that the project will have a direct result in permanently increasing employment. Then, similar to the previous one, the issuing of loans will be in installments, running with building inspections, extending the project timelines from 12 to 24 months, permitting multiple applications, and incorporating the grant repayment if the project isn't completed in 24 months or the property sells and changes business. So much shorter on that one, but really, again, looking at the purpose, it has to be tied to increasing employment and also opening it up to all commercial and industrial properties in town that are either expanding or attracting.
Questions on area 2? Councilor Schenker.
Just a quick question there. The streetscape, will that have a direct result in increasing employment?
So I think you could argue that the fact that, these industries are putting their best foot forward, making themselves an appealing, you look at the streetscape and the signage and the exterior of a business, and I, as a potential employee, factor that in to my decision. And I think that is, to a certain extent, we want them to be an appealing employer for the community and the industry as a whole as well. So the fact that they can be leaders here and put their best foot forward, I think, it really does, it goes a long way. And you put that extra attention and detail, and it shows that you're a bit more progressive and, care about some of those softer areas that maybe not every employer does. And for me as a potential employee, that certainly has an impact.
I think in general, it would be tied to a larger project where sometimes those softer type of things kind of get put aside. So we really want to encourage, just taking a little bit of time and effort to be able to invest in those streetscape items. So that it just puts the best foot forward. And if you're spending a large investment in your business and growing employment, then having those softer ones certainly helps as well.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's no other comments or questions.
Councilor McConnell, did you?
I did, thank you, and I was going to touch on the streetscape thing that Gory did as well. One thing that I've noticed in some businesses, certainly not all, but some businesses that have undertaken a streetscape improvement within a short period of years, it's completely neglected, and all of a sudden it becomes an eyesore. It's either a boulevard that they've made, or I think in a parking lot with grass. The grass isn't cut, there isn't any grass, it's full of weeds, it's full of garbage. It's an eyesore rather than something that makes the town look good. Large planters, for example, in an area downtown that were put in and then neglected, and I think we've taken them over this year or the last year. Green space that may be dedicated, but then they don't look after it. So I think if we are going to consider doing something along the lines of this, there should be a maintenance clause attached to it to ensure that something that we've paid for is going to become an eyesore in a short period of time. And I don't know how you would word that, but I think that's very important. One other thing that is in pretty much all of these is the quote, if project isn't completed within 4 months of approval, a grant prepayment is required. I look at definition of project. What do you actually mean by project? Anybody?
So I think project would fall under the areas being discussed, so one of the 5 areas, as well as within one of the subcategories of what's being discussed. So if they're saying, I want to redo the front of the store or my business, and that's a facade grant, and we would consider one application as part of one project. So I think that would be kind of how I categorize that. And we are also very clear that, even if you put forward a project and it's only concerning the outside, and then you come forward and want to do something on the inside, that's more than fine. You just can't apply to the same category within a stipulated amount of time. And that's one of the things that we've added. Because currently, how it's worded is that if you got a facade grant, you would never be able to apply for a facade grant again. So now we're trying to put in some guidelines of where you would be able to apply for those in future years. But really, when I think of a project, it was something that triggers a building permit and then goes along with all of those guidelines that have to be followed.
And I would also suggest, like, just build on that when it comes to the application itself. It clearly has to specify exactly what you are proposing. A checklist, summary of the plan work. And I think, that's a critical piece to it as well, that we are, we have that in what the original terms of the project were, that it's important that, if significant changes are going to be made, or we're going to stray from some of those things that were approved under the original terms, then at that point, that would also put the project into question, whether it's been completed as it was originally approved. But I would say that, the initial application is also a very critical piece to that, because that's where you get that itemized list of all the specific work that is going to be completed as part of the committee's approval.
Okay, well, that really still doesn't satisfy my curiosity here. I'll give you an example of and I'm not going to mention the address, but we a number of years ago approved a project, if you will, that was directed toward the facade of a particular building. The building before this took place was inhabited. The project that we approved, the improving of the facade of the building was done. It looks great. But several years later, the building is still not inhabited. And to me, that is not why we grant money. We grant money to ensure that if there are apartments up top, that they are being redone as part of the project. And that's why I want to know what the word project meant. Is the project what the person applies for? In other words, the facade grant. So if the facade is fixed, despite the fact that the rest of the building is still inhabitable, is that a good result? I don't happen to think so, and I don't think we should be granting money for it. I think we should learn our lesson. I can understand, and I would approve if somebody wanted to apply for a facade grant as part of a larger redevelopment project. But if the larger redevelopment project does not go ahead, or if it's not completed in, well, here is 24 months, I would say that's reasonable, then I believe what we have forwarded should start coming back to us as an incentive to go ahead and finish the project. Because let's face it, this is taxpayers' money, and I think taxpayers should expect more from their money than just firing at it and not seeing a habitable result of the whole thing. So I make that clear?
Yeah, and I think we're all in agreement on that, but I'll let Matthew have a comment towards it. But I will say some of the issues we've had, and you're absolutely right, we've had a few of these that have just kind of dragged. Part of it is COVID, part of it's just the circumstances we've run into, but you're right, it has to be tightened up for sure. So Matt, comments?
Yeah, so I think that's really the impetus behind the incorporated grant repayment requirements. And certainly I hear exactly what you're saying. And yeah, I think, you know, if in the course of 24 months they haven't completed it and they haven't completed the entire project for which the application was submitted, then I think there needs to be kind of that clawback in there. And that's the wording that we would look to add. And so what I'm hearing is that you like a clear definition of project, you like a clear definition of the fact that it should be an active commercial property. Was a previous comment. And then the second one being that we need to make sure that you know, it's then inhabited or for rent or available for rent at the end of whatever project is there. Because at the end of the day, our intention is for, we're not just here to do projects on buildings, we're actually here to make them useful again and increase their tenancy as well as the available stock of buildings available for rent and inhabitants. So I think those are two very to overall verbiage to support that.
And we also have two added tools there now as well with the revised property standards bylaw, as well as the vacant properties. So we can go after people that are leaving buildings empty for periods of time as well. So I think it all does tie in to pushing us in the direction you're talking about, Lee. So I think that's anything further on that. I think we've got the wording captured. And everyone good with that? I mean, I'm not hearing anyone disagreeing with Lee's comments, and I think the staff have already pushed us in that direction with this, because we did talk about that when we had planning meetings and so on. This is a definite focus of the revisions. So anything further on this specific item? Are you good?
I am, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if you want to take us into, are we on to 3 now? Heritage? Dana?
Okay. So we are, for this program, not a lot of changes recommended as far as the current funding that's available under grants. So we currently have $2,000 available for engineering and or architectural reports. Still recommending that be unchanged. Facade, we offer up to $3,000, recommending no change to that. Accessibility is $2,000. We're recommending that stay the same as well. And the interior improvement grant is $2,000. We're recommending no change to that. We are recommending increasing the build permit application fees from $500 up to $1,000 or 10% of the building permit fee, whichever is higher. And we thought the most beneficial amendment that we could make to the heritage area was to offer the loan program, which has not been available in the past. It's just wasn't an option with the heritage. And, you know, based on what we're seeing today with the few properties that we have approved under this category, that's really where the interest level would lie. You know, what we're seeing is renovations, major restoration projects being made to heritage properties. The Crane House would be a prime example of that. That's a significant project where we do tend to see them, they tend to be more significant when it comes to the heritage properties. So, you know, a nominal grant here and there just really doesn't necessarily, I think, align with the type of projects that we're seeing, whereas a new interest-free repayable loan program, I think, would be a much better suited to the nature of this program. So we're recommending that council approve that as an option under this program, and I'll pass it over to Matthew. He'll take you through just a couple of other changes.
So the purpose of this particular area would be to maintain and restore our cultural heritage in the town of Prescott. Issuing the loan funds in installments versus lump sum payments, extending project timelines from 12 to 24 months, and then also repayment of grants if it's not done within 24 months, or the property sells and change uses. Thank you.
Open it up for comments, questions. Seeing none, I've got a couple myself though. So essentially with the interest-free loan, I mean, that's a big potential expansion. I mean, it should flow through and whatever anyways, but so define heritage for me. We wanted a definition of project. I'll ask about heritage.
So the heritage building has to either be designated or be listed as property of interest. So it would only be open to those properties.
Okay. And it's just any residential.
It's any
Some are
building.
commercial.
Yeah, so
Yeah, but it does include residential. Sorry, I wasn't clear.
it's any building that's on those. When in a couple of minutes, we're going to get to the fact that you can't apply for grants under more than one stream. So even if you're in the downtown area and you're a heritage building, you can apply for heritage building or the downtown area. You can't apply under those streams.
So no one's walking out of here with $200,000-$300,000 and
Correct. And you can't apply under multiple streams for the same project. So so those were some things that we just wanted to be because we have had a couple of inquiries about, well, I have a heritage building and I'm in this area. Can I apply under both? That's just a no. So
well, some could be multiple projects too. You'd have commercial down, of course, and residential up. But the way, I mean, this was always, I mean, we talked about this expanding. We first brought the CIP in 2008, 2009, because we did it briefly in that the term I was on council, if I remember correctly, and then we expanded it a couple of times, and now we're expanding it more. This was always the issue. I mean, giving it to residential, that's the only issue that I always kind of run up against, because if somebody's got a house that's side-by-side neighbors, house could be built within 5 years of one another. I've got a plaque on my place, the neighbor doesn't, but that qualifies that person, yet they're paying the same taxes, the same residential. So you see where I'm going with that? It does kind of segregate people. And that's always where I've had a bit of a concern. And I don't know if it's a hill I would die on and vote against it, but it does kind of concern me a bit, because I could see some residents having real issues with that. When they'll find it a very potentially prejudicial to some people. So I'm just wondering, is there any way we could, I mean, we've got housing issues. Is there any way we could tweak that? So or even add a component where we'd prioritize, if you're taking, say, a heritage home and you're revamping it, like Crane House is an example, the old Nunnery. I mean, that was turned into some really nice residential. And is there something there that would actually, so it wouldn't look like we're just giving money to Joe homeowner to make their beautiful heritage property even more beautiful? Because, in general, the people that do own the heritage properties tend to have a few dollars and so on. And I just don't like the look of that. And I can see some people having some issues. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a way to tag this into affordable housing and, make that a component. Because if you are going to take like a Crane House or any heritage property, I mean, that the obvious use for a lot of them, even 440 Dibble across the street from my place. I mean, I think it's almost a fait accompli. That's not going to be a family home forever because the place is, it's a mansion basically. So I don't know, comments, questions, am I out to lunch on this? But it does concern me and it always has, going way back. But any comment from staff on?
We'd be happy to do some additional research and take a look at some other CIPs, just exactly how they word the heritage component and see if there's something that could address that issue.
I think we might be missing an opportunity if we don't include housing in here somewhere. Just because of the current situation and what's happening. And I think you might maybe you get some people that want to, hey, are you complete reworking of some units in an older property and $100,000 interest free could actually, free up a unit or two. That's actually pretty good money well spent, I would think. But anyways, I just throw it out there. Teresa, you had your hand up?
Maybe just to educate myself, heritage owned homes, though, not like, aren't their hands tied as to exactly what they can and cannot do? So they already carry across that somebody I wouldn't.
Sometimes, because some of them are actually predicated on specific architectural heritage components. So it's not the whole house. And I think even 440 has some issues with that, with the stairs in the back. The stairwell, I think, is designated, and so it's part of the back, but other areas can. So we need Fraser here to actually fully explain that. But I think it does. It just depends on the property, what's protected, what's designated, what's not. Some are whole homes, some are not.
So you see what I was saying, like they're already carrying across that non-heritage homeowners don't have to carry, right? So if this is one benefit that they get that I wouldn't get.
But it's also the property owner's choice to buy that with those provisions intact. So you can say that as well. But you took that burden on.
That's fair.
I mean, I don't want to be critical of this because I love the expansion of everything we're doing here. But I just think it's something that should probably be looked at in advance, because I think we could get into an issue with some homeowners if we're segregating this with the way we could be. But anyways, I just leave that comment with staff on the housing aspect. I think that the housing somehow I think we should try to incorporate it somewhere. Other comments on this section, Ray?
What was the area that this covers?
Only houses that are designated or listed as areas of interest.
Streets, the entire town?
Yeah, so it's only the ones that are listed through bylaw. So.
Can I just ask a question about that? I was just checking with Ray. Has there, in the past, have we had a lot of applications from Heritage?
Since 2018, there's been one.
When we had this, when this started, you'll recall, Brett, that the area went a long way along King Street, and we got in trouble with a couple back then that were strictly housing units. And I'd hope that we could avoid that again.
That's the other question. You could get a lot of demand on this one. Granted, I mean, I know how many do we have plaqued in town? There's obviously a limited number, but it's enough.
31 designated, 25 significant.
Okay, so but even if
56 properties potentially would be eligible.
Yeah. And if I've got a home like that.
Society doesn't designate anymore, right? Because they could so choose to.
Yeah.
Add.
Well, we added quite a few not many years ago. Didn't we add like a dozen or 20 or we added quite a few when I think Fraser was on council then. So yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. And I just wonder if housing can be worked in here somewhere to make that part of the priority because of the situation overall. Anything further, Gory, right?
No.
Lee?
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Quite frankly, I share your concern when we're getting into housing here. Oh, excuse me. If you go for a walk up and down the different streets in town, I'm sure you wouldn't have any trouble coming up with 50 pretty quick that you would consider heritage homes. They may not be the big 3-story stone or brick buildings, but they've been around for a long time. And it's kind of a slippery slope. I'm not saying I disagree with this or I would vote against it, but I have to go back to the original idea of this program, and that was to improve the main street. And I know we have all sat through an election, another one coming, and the question that always gets asked at every all candidates meeting is, what are you going to do about the downtown, or words to that effect? And this is all, we've always been able to point to this program and saying, well, we are doing this for the downtown. What we're proposing to do here is not necessarily in the downtown. We're spreading it out. We're going up Edward Street. We're going in the industrial park. Maybe we're going into the town, into residential. We only have so much money for grants, and yes, we can add to it. But when it gets right down to it, what is the priority? We cannot be all things to all people. And we are going to have open houses in relation to this coming up, and it's coming back in August, as Matthew mentioned. But between now and then, I think we should just bear that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think everybody's expressed at least some concern about it, and maybe some clarification. So if we could flag that item then, and, obviously staff's taking notes on that. So that's something we're going to want to revisit and see what, the public response is. If, public meeting on July 11th, I'm sure it's not going to be a full house, but it could be wrong. It's, you never know. Maybe the weather will be terrible, but I doubt too many people are going to want to spend that night indoors. But anyways, it's something we can flag. And I think everybody's in agreement that we should look at this a little more. We've got a pile of different suggestions on maybe we could fine tune it, change it a little bit. Maybe it comes back in a format that's a little more palatable for everyone, or maybe, or maybe not. But we'll definitely, so we'll take a look at that. Anything else on area 3, comments, questions? Okay, I think we're good, and we're on to 4 brownfields, correct? Dana, please.
Okay, so not a huge plethora of changes recommended under the brownfield. Again, we've had, somewhat limited uptake. We've approved 1 brownfield application since 2018. And we would anticipate, there's definitely some properties that would be eligible for that. So I think it's an extremely valuable program that I would recommend retaining, certainly, but not really suggesting proposing any changes under this. So we currently have study phase 1, which provides up to $5,000 for property owners to complete the phase 1 environmental assessment that would be required. And then we provide up to $10,000 for the owner to complete the phase 2 environmental assessment that may or may not be required depending on the outcome of phase 1. And then we also offer the existing building permit application fees currently sit at $500, recommending a similar change to these to increase them to up to $1,000 or 10% of the building permit fee. And then we offer 2 tax-related incentives as part of this brownfield category. The first being the property tax cancellation, which is actually a full-out cancellation of taxes during the rehabilitation of that property. So the time when they are actually going in and remediating whatever potential contaminants were found to get it essentially to a development build-ready state, that's that period where the taxes would potentially be canceled if they're approved. And then once it is constructed, say you have a new apartment building or something that is constructed subsequent to the cleanup, the new assessment that comes in for that property, we would provide the tax increment grant for. So no change recommended for that. Very similar to the other programs, except it's paid out over a period of 4 years, starting at 100% and decreasing by 25% each year. So very similar, not a whole lot of changes recommended under this program. I think it serves its purpose well, and I'll pass it over to Matthew to cover some of the other changes.
So the purpose of this area is to restore brownfield properties to productive use. And we look at extending the project completion from 12 months to 36 months because brownfield projects can take quite a bit longer. And then also that repayment if the project isn't completed in that amount of time or the property sells and changes uses. There's no other changes to that area.
Comments, questions? Councilor Young.
I guess it's in the existing bylaw, but a maximum of 3 years to rehabilitate property. Doesn't that seem like an extreme period of time?
Not necessarily. I think the one property that has been approved through that, I think took about 24 months from the time that they started their phase one to the time that they rehabilitated and building started on that lot. So I don't think 36, depending on the size and extent of the contamination, that 36 months would be out of the question.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, wasn't that extenuating circumstances?
And that's what we're trying to address is the extenuating circumstances. And so a lot of times, if you're going from a brownfield to a residential, you're going to have to do something called a record of site condition and submit that to the ministry to sign off on, and that can take a considerable amount of time. So we're trying to not only allow for the remediation, but also for them to obtain their record of site condition if it's required.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. Other comments, questions on brownfields? Sorry, what did you have?
I was debating whether to open my big mouth, but I'm.
Okay, moving on. No, seriously, if you have anything, throw it in.
What I would say it goes way beyond our scope here, because I think the way the entire province deals with brownfields is ridiculous. In the past, you could build in a brownfield, the executive in Brockville's on an old coal field, Prescott Place is on a coal field, the United Counties building, there was a huge oil tank that sat there. I think your dad worked down there at one time, didn't he? I agree with the phase one assessment, phase two assessment. When you know what's there, if you have something that is radioactive or horrendously dangerous, well then yeah, you got to deal with it. But I suspect an awful lot of these brownfields are things that aren't horrendously dangerous, and I think the provincial governments, given the cost of remediation on the property, should be alternatives. For example, if you have a site that is contaminated but not severely so, if you're building a multi-story building like the Mariners Club, you've got a garage in the basement. Nobody's living on that ground. They're probably 20 feet above it. If you're building housing, well, what if you put garages on the main floor and your living accommodations on the second floor? If you separate the people from the property, I think that is something that we should be pushing the provincial government to look into how you can utilize these properties with that, not all of them certainly, but a quantity of them without doing the huge dig out and remediation that is currently required. That only makes sense to me in today's costs. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a tough question. That's, goes without saying, and the standards have been increased dramatically since the 90s. It's just been going up, and I doubt the standards are gonna be relaxed. But where you could really have, and I think this is maybe something we look at for an AMO or a Good Roads as part of a delegation to have a better, and we did talk with Minister Clark about that 2 months ago when we had that meeting about brownfield, and especially if you've got employment lands, that there should be some assistance with the cleanup. And we've got that issue downtown with, what we call the hotel site. I mean, that's the old coal docks, and that site's quite contaminated. We know just from what we reviewed in that that small area by the marina, but I mean, further down is probably a whole lot worse. Given that's where the majority of the industrial, the coal was stored, that's where the oil was. There's probably a lot of bad news down there in any sort of EA. So I guess, you know, my only comment on this was, does this go far enough? And I don't honestly know what what other municipalities do, but it seems like every time we go to build anything in town, we immediately get hit with, yeah, EA's come back and it's contaminated. And we've had that all across the downtown. It's in areas in the north end. There's a private project going now that I know has got some potential issues there as well, and that's going to lead to job creation too. So, you know, Lee's correct. I think that it's probably something we could lobby for and just see what all is available through the province. But I just wonder, and I can't speak to anything specific, but could we look at other municipalities? Did we look at other municipalities to make this as aggressive as possible? Simply because this comes back with almost every development we have. We don't have a lot of greenfield development in this town because, well, like we mentioned, we've all referred to the whole St. Lawrence, it was all coal fields and industrial use up to the 40s, 50s. So you've got contaminated sites everywhere. Was it Coburg dealing with that one? Coburg or Port Hope, Coburg, because that was back in our report, and that's like a 50-year project or something. And you know, we get the same sort of thing here. You look at the old pictures of Centennial Park in the 50s, and it's basically just a big coal field. You know, to the point you can pick up 20 pieces of coal just at a quick swim. It's still there. So anyways, that's my only observation. But Matt, anything on that? Is there anything else potentially we could look at there? I mean, you can always raise the numbers, but does that even really matter in the end when we're talking about potential multi-million-dollar cleanup jobs?
Right. And so I think we haven't seen I don't think I've seen anything that's more aggressive than this. But certainly we can take a look at that and see if there's something out there.
And maybe flag that for AMO in August as a delegation with whomever the incoming Minister of Municipal Affairs is going to be, and maybe Ministry of the Environment, because I think that would follow up on the discussions we had 2 months ago now. And we raised some good points there in connection with what we're doing and trying to do with Augusta. So maybe we ask for a delegation there for AMO in August. Probably a good one to touch on again. Any further comments on the brownfields? Seeing no, and I think now we're on to Area 5, which Ray predicted everyone's going to have a lot of comments on. So we'll see. Dana, take it away.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have a new area that we're proposing under the CIP program. A lot of municipalities have been exploring this category and adding it to their CIP portfolio. So it's you know, not something that we're proposing that's out of the realm of possibility. But I think, you know, we've done some pretty extensive research on the residential incentives that are being offered by other communities. And I think we've come up with a really good recommendation of options that we have the capacity to provide and that makes sense with some of the processes and procedures that we have in place as part of our residential development application requirements. So we're recommending for this new program, which would be to support large-scale residential developments. First and foremost, I think it's important to preface that this is not for someone who wants to come in and say build a single-family home on one lot. This is for a residential developer coming in with a larger scale, probably mixed-use residential development that ideally would also have an affordable housing component attached to it. So not geared to income, but affordable. And Matthew's going to take you through a really good summary of what affordable is in that realm. But essentially what we're recommending is a new residential development incentive category, again, for large scale developments with an affordable housing component. So there's the building permit and application fees. We're recommending they could receive a similar grant for that, up to $1,000 or 10% of the building permit fee, whichever is higher. So again, it's just designed to help reduce the cost of those building permits, especially that they may incur for some of these larger scale projects. And then we're also recommending a property tax increment program, very similar to a lot of the other incentives, categories that we have, which would be a tax increment grant starting at 50% versus 100%. You'll notice that is one of the key differences between the other categories for residential. And then it would decrease by 10% each year, paid annually for up to 5 years. So that's to offset the increase in taxes that comes through the impact reassessment once that property is redeveloped. And that would, again, help support those large scale residential developments that have the affordable housing component. And there's a number of other incentives that some other municipalities have been looking at, things like canceling development charges, things of that nature. We really didn't necessarily feel our community was set up for those type of incentives, and I think this is a really good example of what you could do without making it too aggressive. And I think council is likely looking for that as well, because it's a new category. So we could look at, see how this goes and maybe look at some new amendments down the road. And I'll pass it to Matthew to cover some of the other aspects.
Thanks, Dana.
So the proposed purpose of this particular area would be to support large-scale residential developments that have an affordable housing component to them. Minimum project size 5 million, and at least 2% of residential units within the development would have to be designated as affordable with a minimum of at least 1. So when we take a look at the meaning of affordable, it's identified in our new official plan through the review, and it's for low and moderate income households so that they pay no more than 30% of its gross annual income in rent and that sort of thing. So the determination is from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and you can see throughout the kind of supporting policies and counties Louisa Grandma homelessness plan, where they're targeting an increase to affordable units, and what we're striving for here is the 2% number. So and obviously number 3 is council may use incentives such as grants and loans through the town's community improvement program and tools permitted in the Planning Act to be able to achieve that. So this is really that enacting type of tool that allows us to help support affordable housing, and that's one of the reasons why it's in front of you this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Comments, questions, Councillor Young?
If we're going to support it, this is nothing. What we've written here. Project has to be $5 million. Building permit for something that's $5 million might be $50,000. Nathan, it's easy to get up to something like that. So we're going to give them 10% of $50,000 off their building permit. The tax increment grant from 50% down every 5 years, for 5 years, that's worth something to them. But this is not over the top going to make somebody do something, and if that's what we're looking for, we better find ways to make this attractive. We have at least 3 or 4 potential projects, depending on the definition of projects, that would exceed $5 million. Coming up in the next couple of years. So I guess I'd like to look at a few other things that might make it more attractive. And if we could tie it in with faster grand opening, I think that would be better too. That some of these projects could linger for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And if there's some way that we could tie some grant money or low interest loans to speeding that up, we'll get it back in the end.
Good points. Councilor Shaker.
I do have a question, and it's kind of been bugging me a little bit. So if they build a brand new $5 million project, are we essentially giving them 50% off their taxes? Because if it was just the land and now it's a building, is that what that means? Like it says the difference in municipal taxes from the improvements, right?
So let's say the taxes are currently $2,000 on the vacant lot. After they build their building, it's now $100,000. So we would give back potentially 50% of the $98,000.
Okay.
In the first year, and then it would decrease to 0 after 5.
And then just to back up on that, on the previous 4 packages, if we haven't had an impact assessment since 17, maybe 16, 17, right? And we've had this big real estate boom, and they put a new facade on, new roof, new windows. Now, the price is going to go up. Impact's going to go up. Is it because of the renovations or is it because of the boom?
So we always try to separate the two. So generally, when there's a reassessment, they don't include new items unless they happen to pick it up. But so what we go back and ask them for is what was the increase in the value simply due to those improvements, as opposed to what was the increase in value due just to the market. So that's where we separate the two, and we wouldn't give them the amounts back on the increased market, but we would give them the increase back or potentially rebate based on the improvements.
Okay.
If I may.
Please.
I think the impact, the assessment on like an apartment building is based on gross rents and then the net operating income. So it's kind of factored into like how much revenue and income is generated, opposed to how nice it looks. Like, I mean, sometimes they're correlated, of course, but they're trying to make it based on that.
So further to that, like that would be a $50,000 a year. That's pretty good. It's better than the $1,000 that you said earlier.
It is. The incremental tax thing is very advantageous to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Legal way of bonusing, really, when you get down to it. It's one of the few tools we have to really offer the money back. Other comments, questions? The only thing I'd say on this, I mean, you know, Ray's got a good point on the building permits, and I just wonder if there's a way. I mean, it's kind of part 2 of what I was saying before with heritage. Those are more the smaller, the smaller builds and the smaller potential residential. And I think we have to include that. Maybe it's actually connected to heritage. Maybe there's something here that looks at both small and large. But I mean, you've got it designated as large scale with the affordable housing. So maybe that can be captured in heritage. Maybe there's a way to branch it off into something else. But my only concern with this, the tax increment grant is, is it enough? Has it been successful in other communities to spark building where there hasn't been? I can't see it. It's got to be beneficial to a point. But again, is it enough? Because we're trying to get over that hump and really get to residential development. We certainly have some interest, but we don't have any shovels in the ground. Well, with the exception of King Street, that wasn't affordable.
Right, and I think that's the key, is that it has to have an affordable component. And when I think of heritage, I'm not aware of too many heritage properties that are going to have that affordable component at this point, which could change in the future. So certainly something that we could look at. But if you're looking at, let's say, and I'm just going to use a 40 unit apartment building, is probably going to be generating about $100,000 in tax revenue per year. So we would, over the 5 years, be providing $150,000 for one unit to make it affordable. In my mind, that's a pretty good amount to be able to offset.
Anyone talk to any developers and gotten feedback there? And if that would actually incentivize them to the point where they'd be interested?
The only thing that we can kind of look at is other plans. At the end of the day, a developer's going to say, well, I need it all. And so,
Well, yeah,
I'm not sure I've ever seen a developer say, oh, no, it's okay.
but are they gonna say like, hey, I just did a project in Timbuktu, Smith Falls, wherever, and this is just a drop in the bucket. It actually, I would rather just build without the affordable component because I can make more money by pulling that out. So I just wonder if there's a correct incentive. What you mentioned with Heritage, I mean, you're right with one of these places like Crane House and some places that are being fully renovated, but we do have, it's historic in town that these older places have not been the super high-end units. Maybe we're at a point where we're moving into that and they're becoming lofts like John Harding did downtown, like it's being done on top of Ray's old place and what Ashley's doing and so on with Ashley Davies. So maybe, but I was looking at it more as a potential for those places that are, and I mean, we've had those issues with fire separation and everything else on a lot of units on King Street and elsewhere, that maybe, making sure we go after that to ensure they're continue to be habitable, because we've obviously had some major issues there. I won't name any addresses, but there's 4 or 5 that I think all of us around this table can remember just in King Street alone there, that would make sure that the units are still habitable. So.
And I think, so this is obviously the carrot. The stick is the vacant building registry.
Yeah.
Where we're now going into buildings and saying, this is not safe, this is not habitable. You need to do X, Y, and Z to at least make sure that we're sustainable and safe from that perspective.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that there's a gentle balance. At the end of the day, we find a pot of money, and that's what we're trying to figure out how we would divvy that up.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I know we've got the added tools, but I just want to make sure that a carrot is enough of an incentive. So, but they're all good points, and we can bring all this back, of course. And Councilor Young, something else?
Should there be a separate set of rules for $1 million project or a $2 million project? I mean, at the moment, they don't qualify for these things, right?
So I think in the discussions that I've had, those that are looking at small projects aren't necessarily looking at affordable or including it in that, simply because they need all the money they can to generate the return on the investment. So.
Right.
I would be careful about just saying no to that, though, because I do go back to the smaller. Somebody wants to renovate some place at 6 units, and there are issues, and so I don't know. I think it's worth a look, anyways. But
I think there's merit to it, but maybe 2.5 is a minimum. But it doesn't take long even for an executive home to get upwards of $1 million, right? And that's really not the intent of it. So I think maybe we could look at different measurements for the eligibility. That it isn't maybe necessarily the project value, maybe it's the number of units, or something along those lines, and a minimum number of units that have to be constructed.
Okay, well, we've got, I think, any other feedback on that one? I think that's probably more than Matt and Dana wanted, but it's good to have too much than too little, I suppose. At least they won't tell me that in private, I'm sure, but it's good to have that, to get that out there, because there's definitely, I mean, we're doing all we can. There is a finite pot of money at this, and you've got to kind of anticipate what the developers want as well, and what actually works, because these things, unless the incentives are crazy huge, they're not going to make a difference in the end, really, anyways. It could make a project. Chances are the project would be coming to Prescott, well, regardless, but this can sometimes put the 50-50 ones over the top. But I just saw it. So anyways, we talked a little bit about different scales here. I mentioned a bit about the heritage thing, and if there's a way to, I don't care if it's under heritage necessarily, if we did something maybe here for smaller project and housing, but I do think it has to potentially include the heritage component. So we've got the feedback there for you guys to take a look at anyways. Anything else on this? And I think we're
So there's just a couple.
just a little bit more. So we good on the housing component? And then we've got, you just want to talk about the housekeeping changes at the end, please.
So there's just an addition of a definition section. So we would define project, heritage, we would define some of the things that we talked about this evening. So so that would certainly help to provide overall clarity to the document. Clarification that the loan funds cannot be used to support the matching grant. So if you're applying for the matching grant and you are required to put up your 50%, you can't use the loan funds to fund your 50%. Then clarification that only one area stream can be applied for property. For example, if your property is perhaps a commercial property in the downtown core and a heritage building, you have to pick one. You can't go with all three. And then finally, applications must be submitted with a detailed plan for use of the funds, delineating loans versus grants. Because a lot of times we'll get the application, they won't identify which one's which, and then it should be easier to identify that as we go through. So those were just overall housekeeping items, and the other is financial implications, which I alluded to earlier, is reallocating the $40,000 unfunded or unallocated fiscal policy reserve to the community improvement plan reserve to support changes in this fiscal year.
Okay, so final comments, questions, Councilor McConnell.
Question, if I may, Mayor Todd.
Please.
We have a pot, a certain amount of money, and how do we decide, or how do you propose to decide if you've got more people that apply for funds than the pot that we have? Are you going to go on a first, or how do we do it now? Do we go on a first come, first served basis, or do we look at all the applicants and do we make some kind of a decision as which one is going to have the greatest impact for the town or the neighborhood, or how do we do it, Matthew?
Staff recommendations to PAC is still
based on first come, first served. So we don't hold all of them until we have them all for the year. We just, as they come along, as they kind of have fulfilled all of their applicant requirements, then we bring those forward to planning advisory for approval. Which is how most of the plans are structured. It's on first come, first serve. And once the plan is exhausted in any 1 year, council can either decide to add more funds to it, or they can be held in abeyance to a following year.
I think if God forbid we were at risk of running out of money, I think we would approach council potentially with a request for an additional allocation.
and we've been close in the past. I think the one
We've
that
been
was
close, yeah.
2019, we were right up to the end.
Yeah.
So there's been good uptake on this, and it's been incredibly, just for everyone out there, like, we're adding to what's already been a really successful program. For anybody that's not familiar with this community improvement program, it's been ongoing for a number of years, huge. What's the numbers, Dana, we always like to point to?
Oh, God, no.
Ballpark it.
Over $400,000 in loan, over 360,000. Sorry, over 360,000 in loans, and we were at $400,000 in grants.
And over 10 million.
Over $10 million leveraged as part of the program, so it's been very significant. Just waiting for this spreadsheet to open it. I can give you exact numbers.
That's okay. That's close enough. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I always, it has been a huge success, and we're just kind of tweaking it and hopefully adding to it if everyone's in approval after we get the final document. Something that's been incredibly successful for the downtown and elsewhere. The only problem is COVID delayed a lot of things, and we've got numerous projects downtown, like Lee mentioned it, things that haven't gone ahead that were going gangbusters before COVID just brought the economy to a real halt for a couple of years, and now we're getting the machine started up again, hopefully with these changes and additions.
Yes, 450 in loans, 450 in grants, 360 in loans.
And
over 10 million in leveraging.
Yeah, that's pretty substantial to say the least. Councilor Burton.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Dana and Matthew for the excellent report. And one of the things, being a committee member of the CIP, is one of the things that we discussed was having the little comments at the end. You know, when Dan was explaining some things, we would say, well, that's a really good idea, but we need to have those comments to bring to council for all of us around the table to understand each and every aspect of the CIP changes and the CIP. So there's lots of good things happening and lots of good changes, and discussion tonight, lengthy discussion, but well worth it, because this is an excellent program of we're investing in our community, and that's important. That's important, and the taxpayers really appreciate that as well. So. Yeah.
And probably should add though, because we did say first come, first serve. It is first come, first serve, but it's fully, all the applications are fully vetted by staff, and then it goes to our planning advisory committee. So it's not just, hey, coming with hat in hand looking for some money. It has to, the benefits have to be there, the documentation has to be there, and both staff and the planning advisory committee really look at all these applications. So everything's vetted as well. Any final comments, questions? This is coming back July 11th to that.
So
is that the
July 11th, in early August, I believe we'll have the planning advisory to review any final comments and feedback from the open house. And then we bring it forward to council on the 22nd
of August. Are we running into any lame duck or anything at that point?
We should be fine at that point. It doesn't fall into the definition of any of those things that you wouldn't be able to pass.
Oh, good. Okay. Because I know it would be over the threshold in terms of the monetary commitment, though, would it not?
No, I think we'd still be under, because it's under a $50,000 change. So.
Oh, okay. Sounds good then. Okay, all right.
Do we have to go to the province?
We do have to inform them that we're revising this and what the revision will look like. But there is no formal approval process.
Okay. There was in the beginning, right?
I believe so.
Way back.
Okay, so I think we're good. We do have the motion on the table to direct staff to come back. Staff need any further comments, direction, or anything? You've taken all the notes, so we're all good with feedback. So I will return to the motion then and call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. Great discussion. I'm going to try to get through staff here, and then we're going to take a break because we actually do have probably an extensive closed session tonight. There's a lot going on, but let's try to just get through these last two items, and we'll take a break before we get into bylaws and the closed. So 12.3 is staff report 66-2022 on the Edward Street sidewalk. That's that east side of King Street to Water Street that we've been discussing a number of occasions. I think we're at the point where hopefully we can put this to bed tonight. Recommendations that council direct staff to proceed with improvements to the sidewalk on the east side of Edward Street from King Street to Water Street as outlined in staff report 66-2022 with an upset limit of $14,000 to be funded by the remaining reserve allocations from 2020 that was to be used for accessibility upgrades for sidewalks. Could I ask for a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Jansman, seconded by Councillor Burton. Mr. Richard, are you going to take that or Matthew?
I can take it.
Either one.
Through you, Mayor Todd. Yeah, so there's lots of discussion on what to do with this portion of the street and the sidewalk portion. So again, the roots are causing a problem with the interlock brick, and it's kind of unusable, unsafe sidewalk as it sits now. So the option to remove the trees and replace them with a concrete sidewalk was discussed in September 2020, but it wasn't a favorable option at the time. And since then, one of the trees was damaged, knocked down, and the roots continue to grow. So on May 2nd, we had a staff report that had the option of completely removing the interlock and replacing it with grass, and council requested kind of continued discussion on it. And then May 16th, we had 5 options reviewed by council, what could be done. So the council decided to continue with third option, and that was to kind of make a compromise. So in the list here, we had the options outlined for May 16th. So we could, option 1 is to leave the remaining trees, remove the interlock bricks, add grass, let's see, the list of pros and cons. I won't go through them all. And then the second one was remove the trees, relay the interlock bricks, plant 2 or 3 new native species trees in the arboretum. And then the third option was remove the trees, relay the interlock, reconstruct the south end of the sidewalk to make it accessible to Water Street, as has been done on the other side of the street, on the west side, and plant 2 more trees, 2 to 3 trees, native trees in the arboretum. 4 was remove the trees, replace all the interlock with concrete, reconstruct the south end again to make it accessible, and then to plant a couple trees. And then the last option is to kind of do nothing or leave it as it sits and look at it in 2023. So further analysis was undertaken to look at the costs of option 3 as directed by council. Remove the 2 trees and the groundings, the stumps and the roots would be about 3,000. Purchase a couple new trees and put them in the arboretum would be a couple thousand. We would excavate and install the new depressed curbs, gutters, and tactile plates as per accessible standards. That was about 8,600. And then the cost to even out the interlock was about 400 for a total of about 14,000. So the other thing to think about is when would you do this? So because there's a couple of promenade weekends scheduled for the first week of July and August, it was this work after the August long weekend to make sure that the work's done safely without interfering with any of those festivities. Alternatively, council could decide not to proceed with the recommendation as outlined. Currently, the financial side of it, there's 14,128 remaining funds that were put aside for 2020 in the sidewalk accessibility upgrades. The third option could be fully supported by these funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard. I guess we did focus in on that third option at the last meeting. So other discussions now that we seem to have the dollar figure on that option pretty fine tuned. Comments, questions? Councilor Burton.
Thank you. I think it would have boiled down to everybody didn't want to get rid of the trees, but it was more about the accessibility. And I think it's important to do the accessibility. The funds are there and move forward on this. And I love the idea that it's after the promenade 2 weekends. That's not going to interfere or anything. So.
Thank you. Councilor Schenker.
Just along that same point, I just wanted to ask Dana. Dana, would you prefer that they do this after July and August? Okay. You want, then that's good. Because I know there was a little conversation about getting it done beforehand. Yeah.
I think if it could happen within the next 2 weeks, then certainly it wouldn't interfere whatsoever. But if we're going to be pushing up on July 1st, then I'm sure operations is very busy in there.
No, I wanted to ask that because I know we were talking about that, but that's good with me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm guessing that time frame is just not really doable. Councilor McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I don't find it acceptable to remove 2 healthy trees in the downtown, so I'm not going to vote for this. But it's obviously going to pass, so I'm wondering if rather than putting the trees in the arboretum, wherever it is down the east end of town, if we could replace some of the 4 trees that were cut down in Centennial Park last summer.
Good point. Sure. We'll look at that then. As we did was they were lost those to disease down there in Centennial, I believe, the one in that park, whatever.
Yeah, so the emerald ash borer.
Yeah.
The ash trees, yeah.
Okay, is everyone good with that? So we can add that as a friendly amendment to the recommendation. Well, it actually isn't in the recommendation, but it's in the report. So we'll just note that for the record that instead of planting at the Arboretum, we'll plant the new trees in Centennial. Good point, Councilor McConnell. Any further comments? I just want to say I'm glad we're at this point as well. I hate losing trees of any sort, but I don't think they were the right trees in the right location, and accessibility is a big factor here, and we've got to have that accessible way from King to Water. As I mentioned in the last meeting, we don't have it in any of the other streets. When you walk down there, I just happened to be down to O'Heafey's on the Friday, and when you come around those corners, there really isn't any room with where the traffic lights are and so on. And then it's even worse over by the clock tower. So I'm with Councilor McConnell. We all hate taking trees down, but in this case, I think it serves a greater purpose. And I think the sad fact is we're going to have to, council, whomever's here is going to have to look at this going forward as well, because we've got a number of trees in the downtown that were planted on King Street that are clearly not suitable for the space, and some are actually ailing quite dramatically. So I think there's going to have to be an assessment of all those downtown trees and probably some tougher decisions made about what's done down there as we move forward. But at any rate, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so 12.4 is the staff report for this evening for April. That's staff report 67, 2022. That's April's financials. Just listed for information, but Mr. Treasurer, any comments?
So everything is going along fairly well to plan at this point. No major variances that we see. We are monitoring fuel, natural gas, and hydro costs closely. Obviously, they're causing a lot of inflationary pressures, but we're also monitoring products and services and their availability as well, because just they're difficult to get at the moment. And then when we do get quotes, they tend to be significantly more than we were hoping. So those are certainly things that we're looking at, but nothing that is cause us to concern at this point. Thank you.
Questions, comments from Mr. Armstrong? And it's probably too early for you to even hazard a guess, but insurance. We kind of dodged that bullet to a certain point where we weren't hit. Is that something we've been given any warning? Is that?
No, I will not know for probably another month or so before what that's going to look like. It's as with everything, I'm not expecting a decrease.
Yeah, that's it's going to be an interesting year. Budgeting going forward this next little while, and then you've got MPAC coming in. I mean, there's going to be a lot of complications the next few years on all the financials as COVID works its way out of this economic system, and then we've got the fun specter of a recession looming at the start of next year. So good times all around, but topic for another day. So I see no further comments. We'll take a quick break. We'll take 10. We'll be back at 8:50, please. We are, 8:50. So take 10 minutes.